Elena Vasquez, a misfit with an old rifle, faces scorn at Fort Bragg's elite sniper school. One impossible shot will defy doubters, save lives, and rewrite the rules of precision. Welcome to Lifebond Tales. Subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Let's start the story. Elena Vasquez stepped off the dusty transport truck at Fort Bragg, her boots crunching on the gravel as she hefted a faded duffel bag and an old bolt-action rifle case etched with the wear of her father's service in the Gulf War. The North Carolina air bit through her threadbare jacket, sharp with the scent of pine and gun oil, as she took in the sprawling base, its concrete bunkers and training fields framed by dense forests under a pale October sky in 2025. At 35, Eleanor was older than the other recruits, her dark hair flecked with early grey, her brown eyes carrying the quiet weight of a decade spent in logistics, moving crates, checking inventories, and dreaming of this moment. Fort Bragg Sniper School was the pinnacle of military marksmanship, a crucible for the elite, and Elena had clawed her way here with relentless practice and unmatched scores on qualification tests. Yet as she joined the formation, she felt the weight of stares from younger recruits, their tactical gear gleaming with cutting-edge tech, their semi-automatic rifles slung with easy confidence. A tall recruit named Marcus Reed, his face sharp with arrogance, eyed her weathered case and smirked. "What's that, a history project?" he called out, his voice slicing through the morning chill, drawing snickers from the group. Elena's grip tightened on her father's rifle, a gift from when she was 16, its wood stock polished smooth by years of her care. She didn't respond, her silence a shield honed from years of being underestimated as the only woman in supply depots, the one who fixed problems nobody else noticed. Instead, she scanned the range flags fluttering in the distance, her mind already calculating wind speed, her fingers twitching with the instinct to jot notes. Captain Laura Bennett, a stern woman with a clipboard and a no-nonsense glare, barked, her names during roll call, pausing at Elena's. "Vasquez, logistics transfer," she asked, her brow furrowing as if Elena's presence was a clerical error. "No, ma'am, sniper candidate," Elena replied, her voice steady, meeting Bennett's skeptical gaze. The captain's eyes flicked over Elena's faded fatigues, scuffed boots, and the rifle case that looked like it belonged in a museum. "We'll see," she muttered, moving on, her tone thick with doubt. The other recruits whispered, their words like gravel underfoot. Too old, too slow, wrong gear. Elena stood taller, her calloused fingers brushing the leather journal in her pocket, its pages thick with ballistic charts, wind tables, and notes scribbled under starlight, guided by her father's patient voice. He'd been a sniper, a man, who believed one perfect shot outweighed a dozen rushed ones, his lessons etched into her bones. She saw him in her mind's eye, his weathered hands guiding hers on the rifle, his quiet pride when she hit a target at 500 yards as a teenager. "You've got the gift, Misha," he'd said, his smile brighter than the desert sun. Now standing among strangers who saw her as an outsider, Eleanor felt the ache of his absence. He'd passed 3 years ago, his heart giving out before he could see her chase this dream. As the formation broke, Marcus strutted past, his rifle slung like a trophy. "Hope you brought a backup plan, logistics lady," he said, his grin wide, his buddies chuckling behind him. Eleanor let the nickname slide, her focus locked on the challenge ahead. She wasn't here to prove them wrong, not yet. She was here to prove her father right, to honor the man who'd seen her potential when no one else did, who'd taught her that precision was patience made lethal. Her heart swelled with the memory of his pride, the way he'd watch her shoot, nodding as if he knew she'd one day stand where he had. She adjusted her duffel, the weight of her father's rifle case grounding her, and headed toward the barracks. The wind picked up, tugging at the flags, and she noted its direction. Southwest, steady at 5 miles per hour. Her journal would capture it later, another entry in the meticulous record she'd kept since she was a girl. The barracks loomed ahead, a grey slab of concrete where she'd sleep among strangers who already saw her as a misfit. But Elena didn't care about their doubts. She carried her father's lessons, his rifle, and a resolve forged in years of quiet perseverance. Fort Bragg would test her, but she'd faced harder battles: grief, dismissal, the slow grind of proving herself in a world that rarely looked twice. As she stepped into the shadow of the barracks, She vowed to carry her father's legacy through every trial, to show that his old rifle and the woman who wielded it belonged here as much as anyone. Elena Vasquez settled into the rhythm of Fort Bragg's sniper school, her days consumed by grueling drills that tested every fiber of her being. The training grounds buzzed with the crack of rifles and the shouts of instructors, the air thick with the metallic tang of spent rounds. The program's mantra, "Speed is survival," echoed in every exercise, from rapid target acquisition to timed sprints across obstacle courses, each designed to churn out snipers who could shoot fast and move faster. Eleanor, with her father's bolt-action rifle, moved methodically, her shots landing with pinpoint accuracy. But the stopwatch was her enemy. Instructors barked orders to engage targets at 300, 500, then 800 yards, demanding split-second decisions. Her peers, armed with sleek semi-automatics, cycled rounds in a blur, while Elena's deliberate reloads left her trailing. Marcus Reed, the loudest of the recruits, led the pack, his rifle spitting rounds with a rhythm that earned nods from Captain Bennett. Yet Elena noticed his shots often grazed the edges of targets, his speed masking sloppy aim. During a break, Marcus leaned against a barrier, wiping sweat from his brow, and called out to her. "Logistics lady, you planning to finish a drill before sunset?" he taunted, his voice carrying to the others, who laughed and mimicked her slow, careful movements. Elena kept her eyes on her rifle, checking its alignment, her fingers tracing the familiar grain of its stock. She'd learned long ago to let insults roll off her, a lesson from her father when she'd faced jeers as the only girl at shooting ranges. "Focus on the target, Mija, not the noise," he'd said, his voice steady, as he adjusted her stance. Now alone in the barracks at night, she pored over her journal, sketching wind patterns and recalculating bullet drop for the next day's conditions. The other recruits gathered in clusters, comparing gear or boasting about scores, but Eleanor stayed apart, her bunk a quiet island in the sea of their chatter. One evening, she overheard Marcus betting with his bunkmates. $10 says logistics lady's gone by week's end," he said, his tone dripping with certainty. The nickname spread like wildfire, whispered in the mess hall, muttered on the range. Even Sergeant Daniel Holt, the grizzled rangemaster, used it absent-mindedly, his eyes barely meeting hers as he inspected her rifle. "That thing's older than me," he said, shaking his head as if her presence was a puzzle he didn't care to solve. Eleanor's heart sank, but she refused to let it show. She remembered her father's late-night talks, his stories of snipers who waited hours for one shot, their patience a weapon sharper than any blade. She clung to that wisdom, even as the program's relentless pace seemed to mock it. During a night drill under the harsh glare of floodlights, Elena struggled to keep up, her hands steady but her timing off. The whistle blew, signaling the end, and she was 3 targets short. Marcus, sweat-soaked and triumphant, had finished first, his score high enough to earn a rare smile from Bennett. "Nice work, Reed," she said, while Elena packed her gear in silence, the weight of failure pressing against her chest. Back in the barracks, she sat on her bunk, her journal open to a page of wind charts, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "You don't need to be the fastest, just the truest," he'd told her once, after she'd missed a shot in a local competition, but hit the next one dead center. She traced his handwriting on an old note tucked in the journal's back, a reminder of why she was here. The other recruits' laughter drifted from the common area, their voices full of plans for the weekend, while Eleanor felt the sting of being an outsider in a place she'd fought so hard to reach. She wasn't just fighting the clock or the targets, she was fighting the assumption that she didn't belong, that her father's rifle, her careful methods, her very existence here was a mistake. Yet each night, as she studied the range conditions, she felt a spark of defiance. She wasn't here to blend in or to win their approval. She was here to prove that precision, not speed, was the heart of a sniper's craft. As she closed her journal, the barracks quiet, she made a silent promise to her father, to herself, to keep going, no matter how many eyes rolled or voices mocked. The road ahead was steep, but Elena Vasquez had climbed steeper. Elena Vasquez stood at the firing line of Fort Bragg's qualification range, the morning sun casting long shadows across the 12 lanes stretched out like a gauntlet. The air was heavy with anticipation, the distant targets glinting at 300, 500, and 800 yards, their silhouettes swaying slightly in the unpredictable North Carolina wind. Today was the first live fire test, a make-or-break moment that would determine who advanced in the sniper program and who would be sent packing. Elena's hands moved with practiced calm, loading her father's bolt-action rifle, its smooth action as familiar as her own pulse. Around her, the other recruits chambered rounds in their semi-automatic rifles, their movements quick and mechanical, designed for speed. Marcus Reed, 2 lanes over, adjusted his scope with a flourish, his confidence radiating like heat. The rangemaster, Sergeant Daniel Holt, paced behind them, his voice booming through a megaphone. Shooters, 60 seconds per target, speed and accuracy, no excuses. Eleanor's heart steadied as she studied the wind flags, noting a slight gust from the east, maybe 4 miles per hour. Her journal, tucked in her pocket, held calculations for just such conditions, but there was no time to check it now. The whistle blew, and the range erupted in a cacophony of gunfire. Marcus's rifle barked rapidly, his targets falling in quick succession, while Elena worked deliberately, exhaling slowly as she aligned her sights. Her first shot at 300 yards punched dead center, a perfect bullseye. She cycled the bolt, adjusted for the 500-yard target, and fired again, the bullet finding its mark with surgical precision. At 800 yards, she paused, reading the wind's subtle shift, her finger steady on the trigger. The shot landed true, but the whistle blew before she could engage her final 2 targets. "Time's up," Holt called, his voice cutting through the fading echoes. "Cease fire." Elena lowered her rifle, her chest tight with the knowledge that she'd fallen short. Marcus, grinning, had finished all his targets, though she could see through her spotting scope that his shots were scattered, some barely clipping the scoring. Rings. Holt walked the line, inspecting targets, and paused at Elena's lane. His eyebrows rose at her tight groupings, each shot a testament to her skill, but he shook his head. "Vasquez, flawless accuracy, but you didn't complete the course, that's a fail." "Marcus, passing score, good speed," he added, clapping the younger recruit on the shoulder. The words hit Elena like a physical blow, but she kept her face neutral, packing her gear as the others moved off the range, their chatter filled with relief and bravado. Back at the barracks, she found a typed notice on her bunk. Reassignment orders to the armory. Effective immediately. No retrial. No second chance. The paper felt like a death sentence for her dream, the one she'd carried since she was a girl, watching her father clean his rifle by lamplight. Marcus sauntered by, his voice laced with mock pity. "Looks like logistics ladies back where she belongs, polishing our scopes." His buddies laughed, their eyes glinting with the satisfaction of seeing her fall. Eleanor folded the orders and slipped them into her journal, her fingers lingering on the page where she'd written her father's words. "Accuracy isn't enough if time decides everything." The barracks emptied as the others headed to the mess hall, but Elena stayed behind, the weight of failure pressing against her ribs. She thought of her father's stories, of missions where a single shot saved lives, where haste would have meant disaster. This program, with its obsession with speed, felt like a betrayal of that legacy. Yet as she sat there, the armory assignment began to feel less like an end and more like a detour. She'd always found ways to turn setbacks into opportunities, like when she'd taught herself ballistics to outshoot the boys who mocked her at the range. Maybe the armory would reveal something the range hadn't. As she packed her gear for the move, Master Sergeant Thomas Klein, a weathered man with eyes that missed nothing, appeared at her bunk. "Heard you shoot like a surgeon, Vasquez," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Too bad the clock's the real judge here." He handed her a key to the armory, his gaze steady. "You'll be with me now. Keep your eyes open. You might see more than you expect." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. The armory wasn't what she'd dreamed of, but it was a place to start over, to find a way to prove that her father's lessons weren't outdated. That precision still mattered. As she walked to her new post, the range fading into the distance, she felt a flicker of hope, like an ember refusing to die. Elena Vasquez adjusted to the dim light of Fort Bragg's armory, a cavernous space filled with the clatter of metal and the faint smell of gun oil, her new world after the crushing reassignment from sniper school. Each morning before dawn, she arrived to clean and calibrate rifles, her hands moving with the same precision she'd brought to the range, though now her targets were the weapons of the recruits who'd outpaced her. The armory was a maze of racks and tools, but Elena found a strange comfort in its order, a place where her meticulous nature thrived. Master Sergeant Thomas Klein, her supervisor, watched her work with a quiet approval, occasionally sharing stories of his own years, maintaining weapons for snipers long gone. As she disassembled Marcus Reed's semi-automatic rifle, she noticed a subtle misalignment in the scope, enough to throw off long-range shots under pressure. She fixed it without comment, her journal now filling with notes, not just on wind and ballistics, but on the flaws she found in each candidate's gear. Marcus dropped off his rifle daily, his taunts predictable. "Logistics lady, don't scratch my baby," he'd say, smirking as he left with his entourage. Eleanor ignored him, her focus on the patterns emerging in her work. She began cross-referencing maintenance logs with range performance data, a task Klein had quietly encouraged by granting her access to the armory's secure terminal. The numbers told a story the instructors weren't seeing. Marcus's rifle had a trigger hitch that caused leftward drift under rapid fire. Another recruit's scope had a tracking issue at 600 yards, and several others showed wear from hasty handling. These weren't just equipment problems, they were signs of shooters prioritizing speed over care, a flaw that could cost lives in combat. Late at night, alone in the armory, Elena compiled her findings into a detailed analysis, her handwriting neat and deliberate, each page a testament to her growing conviction that the program was failing its snipers. But sharing this report meant risking everything: her career, her place at Fort Bragg, the fragile respect she'd earned from Klein. She confided in him one evening, the armory quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. "I see what's wrong, sir," she said, her voice low but firm. "These candidates are fast, but their rifles and their habits betray them under stress." Klein leaned back, his weathered face thoughtful. "You're stepping on dangerous ground, Vasquez. The brass loves their speed records. You sure you want to poke that bear?" Elena nodded, her father's voice echoing in her mind. "Truth matters more than applause, Mija." She spent nights refining her report, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, her journal now a weapon of its own, filled with evidence that could upend the program. Then came the complication. Captain Laura Bennett stormed into the armory one morning, her face a mask of controlled anger. "Vasquez, we need to talk about your access to classified performance data," she said, her tone sharp. "That's above your clearance." Elena's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground, her hands steady as she faced Bennett. "Ma'am, I've been analyzing rifle performance as part of my duties. The data shows problems with candidate readiness." Bennett's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of curiosity beneath her irritation. "Show me," she said, crossing her arms. Eleanor opened her journal, walking Bennett through the numbers, Marcus's trigger issues, the scope misalignments, the correlation between rushed shots and degraded accuracy. Bennett listened, her expression unreadable, then left without a word, taking a copy of Elena's analysis. Later that day, Elena learned Bennett had forwarded the report to Colonel Maria Alvarez, the base commander, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to training. Elena felt a mix of dread and hope, knowing her findings could either change everything or end her military career. Klein caught her eye as she cleaned a rifle, his voice low. "You've got courage, Vasquez. Not many would stick their neck out like that." Elena managed a small smile, her heart heavy with the weight of her choice. She thought of her father, who'd once stood up to a commanding officer to argue for better equipment, earning respect, but also enemies. His courage had shaped her, and now she was walking the same path, armed with nothing but data and determination. As she locked the armory that night, the base quiet under a blanket of stars, Elena felt a shift within her. She wasn't just fixing rifles. She was uncovering a truth that could save lives if only the right people would listen. Her journal, once a private refuge, was now a call to action, its pages heavy with the potential to reshape a flawed system. Elena Vasquez watched from the armory's narrow window as a convoy of black SUVs rolled through Fort Bragg's main gate, their polished exteriors glinting under the midday sun. General David Thornton, a Pentagon heavyweight, had arrived to inspect the sniper program, trailed by a retinue of officials and a media crew filming the military's cutting-edge training methods. The base buzzed with tension, every soldier on high alert to showcase the program's speed-driven excellence. Elena, confined to her armory duties, felt the sting of being sidelined, her report on candidate readiness still unanswered by Colonel Maria Alvarez, who'd been unreachable amid the preparations. She focused on her work, calibrating a rifle scope with meticulous care, but her spotting scope, requisitioned for equipment checks, sat on the workbench, offering a clear view of the range. The morning's live-fire demonstration unfolded like a choreographed show, with Marcus Reed and other top candidates blazing through targets at breakneck speed, their rapid shots drawing approving nods from Thornton. Elena's heart sank as she watched, knowing their accuracy suffered under the polished facade. By noon, Marcus swaggered to the armory to drop off his rifle, his chest puffed with pride. "Saw that logistics lady," he said, his voice loud enough to carry. "That's how real snipers shoot." Elena handed back his rifle, noticing a faint feeding issue she'd fixed earlier, and said simply, "It's ready." He grabbed it without a glance and left for the afternoon stress test, a simulated combat scenario with smoke, noise, and shifting targets to mimic battlefield chaos. Elena returned to her workbench, but her eyes kept drifting to the range where smoke machines churned and speakers blared gunfire sounds. Through her spotting scope, she tracked the candidates, noting Marcus's rushed breathing and erratic aim under the added pressure. Then, disaster struck. A smoke generator malfunctioned, spewing a thick cloud that blanketed the range, far denser than planned. The wind shifted abruptly, carrying the haze in wild swirls, obscuring visibility. Elena's pulse quickened as she spotted a critical error. A pop-up target at 700 yards had activated without its orange training marker, making it look like a real threat. Worse, a civilian technician, unaware of the exercise, was working just beyond the target, checking equipment in the restricted zone. Marcus, positioned on the range, steadied his rifle, his scope locked on the unmarked target. Elena grabbed, her radio trying the range control frequency. Static. The exercise's jamming protocols blocked all signals. She tried the emergency channel. Nothing. Through her scope, she saw Marcus's finger tightening on the trigger, his posture tense, unaware of the technician's presence. Her mind raced, calculating the risk. Marcus's documented accuracy issues under stress meant a high chance of a miss, potentially fatal to the civilian. Elena had seconds to act. She grabbed her father's bolt-action rifle, its weight a steady anchor, and moved to the window with fluid precision. Her heart pounded, but her training took over, her father's lessons guiding her hands. She didn't aim at Marcus, but at his rifle's receiver, a 6-inch target at 350 yards, moving slightly as he adjusted his stance. The wind, now gusting at 6 miles per hour from the southeast, required a precise hold-off. Her journal's calculations flashed through her mind. Bullet drop, wind drift, angle. She exhaled, her world narrowing to the crosshairs, the trigger. Braking cleanly, the shot cracked across the range, a single sharp report. Marcus's rifle sparked and jerked, his shot firing harmlessly into the dirt, missing the target by yards. He stumbled back, stunned, staring at his disabled weapon. The range fell silent, smoke still drifting, as General Thornton and his entourage turned toward the armory, confusion etched on their faces. Captain Bennett's voice exploded over the radio. Who fired an unauthorized shot? Elena set her rifle down, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She stepped out of the armory, crossing the gravel toward the demonstration area, every eye on her. General Thornton, flanked by Colonel Alvarez, met her halfway. "Explain yourself, Specialist," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Ma'am, sir, there was a safety hazard," Elena said, addressing Thornton directly. The target system malfunctioned, showing a real threat profile at 700 yards. A civilian was in the impact zone. I disabled the shooter's weapon to prevent a tragedy. Alvarez's eyes widened, and she ordered an immediate check of the target system. The investigation confirmed the malfunction, the technician's presence, and the near-catastrophic error. Elena's shot, they found, had struck Marcus's rifle with surgical accuracy, disabling the firing mechanism without harming him, a feat that left the range crew speechless. Thornton studied Elena, his gaze piercing. "How did you make that?" "Shot, Vasquez?" Elena pulled out her journal, opening to a page of wind and ballistic notes. "Sir, I've been tracking conditions and equipment performance for weeks. I knew the distance, the wind, and my rifle's capabilities. It was about precision. Under pressure, not speed." The words hung heavy, a quiet challenge to the program's ethos. Marcus, still clutching his ruined rifle, stared at her, his usual bravado gone. Alvarez stepped forward, her voice firm. "General, this is Specialist Vasquez, our senior armorer. Her actions today likely saved a life." Thornton nodded, his expression unreadable. "I want a full debrief on this incident, and I want Vasquez in the room." As the crowd dispersed, Elena stood alone, the weight of her actions settling in. She'd been invisible, dismissed. But in one shot she'd changed everything. Elena Vasquez stood in Fort Bragg's conference room, the air thick with the hum of fluorescent lights and the weight of scrutiny, as General David Thornton presided over the investigation into the range incident. The walls were covered with charts from her report. Its pages now a roadmap for change, projecting the gap between the sniper program's speed-driven metrics and true combat readiness. Colonel Maria Alvarez sat beside Thornton, her face a mix of respect and resolve, while Captain Laura Bennett lingered at the back, her arms crossed, her earlier skepticism softened by the undeniable evidence of Elena's shot. Elena stood at the front, her journal open, walking the room through her findings with a calm she hadn't felt in months. "Ma'am, sir, our training prioritizes rapid engagement, but real-world scenarios demand judgment, knowing when to slow down for the shot that counts," she said, clicking to a slide showing Marcus Reed's accuracy, dropping 35% under simulated stress. "These candidates excel in controlled drills, but in chaos, their precision falters, risking lives." Thornton leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "You're saying we're training for the range, not the battlefield," he said, his tone probing but not dismissive. Elena nodded. "Yes, sir. Speed is a tool, but precision under pressure is the skill that saves." She pointed to historical data. Missions where rushed shots led to friendly fire or civilian casualties, each failure a ghost of what her father had warned against. Marcus, seated in the front row, his arm in a precautionary sling from the rifle. Incident shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet unease. He raised his hand, his voice hesitant. "If we slow down in combat, we're dead," he said, but the bravado was gone, replaced by a question. Elena met his gaze. "It's not about slowing down. It's about choosing the right moment," she said. "A fast miss kills the wrong person. A precise hit saves everyone." Thornton stood, his presence commanding silence. "Specialist Vasquez, your report and your actions yesterday exposed a flaw we can't ignore," he said. "Effective immediately. We're overhauling this program. First, all candidates will face new evaluations prioritizing precision under stress. Second, the curriculum will shift to adaptive marksmanship, balancing speed with judgment. Third, Vasquez, you're reinstated as a sniper candidate and will help design the new protocols." The room stilled, eyes turning to Elena, some with newfound respect, others with unease. Bennett stepped forward, her voice measured. "General Vasquez failed our original standards," she said, but her tone lacked conviction. Thornton's gaze was sharp. "Captain, she made a shot you couldn't teach, under pressure you didn't foresee. That's the standard we need." Elena felt. Her knees weakened but held her ground, her father's voice echoing, "Truth matters, Mija." After the meeting, Marcus approached her, his swagger replaced by something raw. "That shot you made," he said, his voice low, "I couldn't have done it." "Not like that." Elena saw the crack in his armor, the first sign of humility. "You can learn," she said. "It's about trusting the moment, not the clock." Later, in the armory, she cleaned her rifle one last time as a support staffer, the familiar ritual grounding. "Huh?" Klein appeared, his gruff smile wide. "You turned this place upside down, Vasquez," he said, handing her a new badge. Instructor Vasquez, Adaptive Precision Training. 6 months later, Elena stood on the transformed range, now part of the Adaptive Precision Sniper course. The loudspeaker announced a new directive. Shooters, your score is based on judgment and accuracy. Time is secondary. Marcus, who'd chosen to repeat the program, moved with focus, his own journal now thick with notes, a mirror of Elena's. A young recruit, Sofia Torres, caught her eye, methodically engaging a 900-yard target with a perfect shot, her patience a reflection of Elena's teachings. The old motto, speed is survival, was gone, replaced on the barracks wall with right shot, right time. Elena's methods had spread beyond Fort Bragg, published in military journals, studied at the Pentagon. During a final inspection, Thornton approached her, his voice warm. "Your work's changing how we train soldiers, Vasquez," he said. "You showed us failure can reveal truth." Elena stood at attention, but inside she felt a quiet triumph, not for the praise but for the lives her work might save. That evening, as the sun dipped below the pines, she received a message from a graduate in Syria. Instructor Vasquez took a 700-yard shot under fire, saved a family thanks to your training. Elena smiled, slipping her phone into her pocket, and opened her journal to its final page, writing, "Precision is a promise kept to those who trust you and those who taught you." As she packed for a Pentagon transfer to implement her standards nationwide, she paused at the base's memorial wall, names of fallen snipers etched in granite. Her father's lessons, once dismissed, now shaped a new generation. Elena walked away, her rifle case lighter, her heart full.